lesson now that expertise in one industry does not necessarily beget expertise in another. The CEO of Nike announced his retirement on Thursday, unexpectedly, it has to be said, after a tumultuous few years at the shoe and apparel company. John Donahoe came from tech. He used to be the CEO of eBay, joined Nike in 2020. But sales slipped and competitors gained. So next month, a long-time former Nike executive is going to take over. A lot of companies have done this, by the way, where a CEO struggles and they're replaced by a familiar face. Think Disney and Bob Iger, Starbucks and Howard Schultz twice, Apple and Steve Jobs years ago. That can bring stability, but it can also bring some risks, as Marketplace's Henry App reports.
The best thing about bringing back an old hand when a company's in crisis is it can happen really fast, says Yo-Jud Cheng, an assistant professor at the University of Virginia. For the company's board,
it allows them to kind of bypass a long, protracted search process in that they already are familiar with the person. They've been more or less vetted to a certain extent.
And the returning leader already has relationships with employees. They know the industry.
And presumably they can jump into action quickly.
That can bring the company some much-needed stability. And in the short term, it could boost their stock price and even quiet down activist investors. But over the long haul,
companies cannot stand still. They've got to continually innovate and grow.
Charles Elson is the founding director of the Weinberg Center for Corporate Governance at the University of Delaware.
And that person who comes back to stabilize the company may not necessarily be the best person to grow the company.
Because the company, the industry, the economy may all have changed while that leader was gone. For example, Elliott Hill has been away from Nike since 2020, says Chris Bingham, a professor at the University of North Carolina.
4 years is like, I don't know how many generations in consumer products. I mean, that's a long time in that industry.
And the strategies that worked in the past may not anymore, he says. That's why in some cases, says Yo-Jud Cheng at the University of Virginia, companies bringing back a former leader may think of them as an interim CEO, whether or not they say that explicitly.
But underlying that, the board is generally going and searching more broadly for a longer-term successor.
The risk is that they don't find a successor, or the new old boss tries to stick around for too long. I'm Henry App for Marketplace.
"10 years ago," says the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average price of a bag of potato chips, 16-ounce bag to be clear, the average price in this economy was less than $4.50. These days, right around $6.50. Yes, a lot of food got more expensive during and after the pandemic, but the rising price for a plain old bag of chips has outpaced inflation for a lot of those other grocery items. Julie Grant from the Allegheny Front wanted to find out why chips are so hot these days.
Kevin Troyer watches a truck unload his August potato crop in Waterford, Pennsylvania.
So these loads are coming in fresh out of the field.
The haul of white-skinned, starchy potatoes tumble out of the truck to his conveyor system where they're washed and sorted. The crop looks pretty healthy, and that's good because farming potatoes is becoming more challenging in Pennsylvania. Troyer's farm has been lucky with the weather this season. Potatoes need cool nights.
Last night, it was down in, I think I had 49 at my house. And actually, potatoes love that kind of weather.
The clean potatoes are loaded onto another truck, which is headed to a Snyder, the Berlin potato chip factory a few hours south near Pittsburgh. They'll be made into chips within 48 hours.
So the big season for potato chips is right around the holidays and the football playoffs, and everybody's having their Super Bowl parties and their playoff parties and stuff like that.
Pennsylvania has more potato chip makers than any other state, and factories like to source from nearby. It reduces the need for long-distance transport. Fuel costs are a major factor in the rising price of potato chips. But growing potatoes here in Pennsylvania is becoming more difficult because of climate change. Bob Leiby is an agronomist and says potatoes are tricky.
The crop is sensitive to weather conditions.
Weather conditions like temperature. In the 1980s in Erie around Kevin Troyer's farm, there used to be 35 nights a year when temperatures were too hot for potato growth. Today, it's more like 50 nights a year. and hotter days are also hard on the crop.
It's easy to get soil temperatures way up out of the range that tubers will even continue to grow.
If the soils hit 85 degrees for long enough, the potato crop is fried.
The climate is changing and changing kind of rapidly, and we have to develop potatoes that are adapted to the new climate.
This is Walter DeYoung, who researches potato genetics at Cornell. He says places like Idaho and Washington have the advantage of larger tracts of land, a longer growing season, and large-scale mechanized irrigation systems. But sourcing potatoes from further away means higher transportation costs for Pennsylvania chip factories. And DeYoung says it's less sustainable.
Do they have the water to sustainably use to grow all those potatoes indefinitely out west? And I think the answer to that is no.
In 2011, Cornell released a potato DeYoung developed that helped northeastern U.S. farmers store their crop long enough for the football season chip rush, which means fewer potatoes from out of state. Transportation costs are just one aspect of potato chip prices, but after the food shortages and supply chain snags of the COVID pandemic, DeYoung thinks there are reasons to keep potato production close to the factories.
In general, potatoes produced out west may be cheaper, but there's some societal value for those disaster years to have production in the Northeast as well.
Because local potato production could mean cheaper chips just in time for football season. In Waterford, Pennsylvania, I'm Julie Grant for Marketplace.
Coming up.
There's a lot of people out there that are fascinated with railroads.
I mean, not the worst thing to be fascinated with, right? First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 38 points today, just under 0.1%, 42,063. The Nasdaq off 65 points, 0.4%, 17,948. The S&P 500 down 11 points, 0.2%, 57 and 2 there. For the week, the Dow gained 1.6%. The Nasdaq added 1.5%. The S&P 500 increased 1.4%. We just heard from Julie Grant about potatoes and climate change, so let us look at some companies that use the tuber in their products. Lay's Potato Chips is a subsidiary of PepsiCo, down 2% today. Utz Brands, which also makes chips under the Dirty and Zapp's brands, dropped 2.75%. And did you know that Pringles are technically not a potato chip, but an extruded snack? What? Anyway, they're owned by Kellanova, which picked up 0.2% today. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business, aiming to help save time by offering smart business buying solutions so there's more time to focus on growing the business and less time doing the admin. More at AmazonBusiness.com. And by Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions. Disclosures at RaymondJames.com. And by Michigan Technological University, where students in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering lead real-world aerospace projects for NASA, GE Aerospace, and more. Online at mtu.edu/MAE.
Support for WNYC comes from Suffs, the Broadway musical about an era where women were not allowed to vote, but were allowed to fight. Their story is a reminder that the world can be changed because they did it before. Tickets at suffsmusical.com.
On Election Day, an estimated 36 million Latinos will be eligible to vote in the U.S., and neither Democrats nor Republicans have their support sewn up. On the next Notes from America, we invite Latino listeners to share what they want to hear from the candidates and which issues are driving them to engage with politics. Join us on Notes from America.
Sunday evening at 6 on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up in the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, the Republican-led Georgia State Election Board has approved controversial new rules just ahead of voting in the swing state. We'll have that and more at 7. Stay tuned.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Risdall. So we had that interest rate cut the other day, a move that could get people feeling a little bit better about this economy because, as we have talked about a lot, consumer sentiment has been kind of sour for a while. Here's a different take on that. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, for 100 years now, people have been letting go of their collective worries, economic and other, by setting them on fire. It's the annual burning of zozobra. People write down their woes, parking tickets, divorce papers, bad report cards, whatever. And the Santa Fe Kiwanis Club builds a giant effigy out of them named Zozobra, or Old Man Gloom. Marketplace's Savannah Marr went to this year's festival.
Zozobra is a 50-foot-tall marionette puppet suspended from a metal frame. He scowls down at the crowd in a white tuxedo with red suspenders and a boutonniere. Behind the fancy outfit, he's stuffed with bills, tax receipts, and whatever else is keeping people up at night.
We're gonna put car troubles in here.
Steph and Mario Orozco took the train up from Albuquerque to see Zozobra burn for the first time since high school.
Gosh, it's been about 15, 20 years.
They couldn't pass up the centennial burn, and with it, a chance to process some expensive bad luck. This year, one of their family cars got broken into and damaged. The other one broke down.
Out in New Mexico, you live so far away from everything else. Gotta have a dependable vehicle, and with a hot summer like this.
Public transportation is not sustainable in any way.
They're waiting in line to put all that gloom to paper and drop it in a box that will go up in flames with the puppet. Steven Cordova came all the way from El Paso to do the same. He's here with his partner and their 5-year-old son, who's wearing tiger face paint.
I just want enough money to, care for my family and not have to live check to check.
Cordova says his salary as a manager at a big box store hasn't been stretching, so he's searching for a new job, maybe as a firefighter.
I wrote that down right now, yeah. So it was a gloom, but it was for more positivity in the next coming year.
And that's kind of the point. Letting go to make room for optimism, says Julia Goldberg, a longtime festival volunteer. She staffs this booth where people drop off their glooms. And somewhere behind sickness and heartbreak, she says money and work stress are always big.
People have brought bills, they've brought canceled checks, work memos, pink slips. A woman was in here earlier and said, "I'm just writing down the names of all my bad colleagues."
Others are hoping to offload more general angst about the economy and where it's headed.
It kind of feels like COVID, the war in Ukraine, things that were directly affecting the economy have kind of stabilized.
Says Katie Beasley, a law student at the University of New Mexico.
I'm just hoping that stays the same way. No more crazy global events for at least a year or something.
Around 8 p.m., volunteers put out a last call for glooms. Soon they'll carry the boxes up on stage to meet their fiery end. Clarabelle Gallegos drops her paper in the box just under the wire.
Is it a secret, or can I ask?
No, it's for the sadness that I have in my heart with the losing of my mother.
Her mother would have been 100 this year, just like Zozobra. And Gallegos remembers coming to this event with her family back in the 50s.
It was very different. This is really commercial.
She chalks this up as another gloom. Gallegos says the burning was once a small community event. Now it draws big-name sponsors and a crowd of 65,000 people from all over for collective catharsis. After a